We're an independent market accelerator on a global mission to clean up cooling and heating through the massive scaling up of efficient natural refrigerant-based solutions that replace HFCs and mean that we do not need HFOs. Today, we'll be talking about heat pumps. And in particular, we'll be talking about a report published today called Accelerating the EU's Shift Towards Natural Refrigerant Domestic Heat Pumps. Everyone is going heat pump crazy. Between the EU F-gas proposal from April and the Repower EU plan announced in May, we felt that this report was perfectly timed to reassure Europe that it can be both ambitious in climate targets and in the scaling up of heat pumps. Many organizations were involved to make this report happen, and individuals. And in particular, I'd like to thank Carolina, Program Manager of ECOS, who will be sharing a few words shortly, Davide, Policy Officer at EEB, who's also joining us today for any questions, and my colleagues, Thomas, who will be speaking next, Ilana and Sabrina, who worked on this from our end. I have some kind of opening messages to communicate in this session. I think it's great that we focus on heat pumps today to move away from gas boilers as quickly as possible. But the message here is that not all heat pumps are equal, especially when you start talking refrigerants inside. The Brussels-based associations EHPA and EPI want Europe to slow down, to be less ambitious on the EU F-gas regulation. And you're using this time the excuse of the heat pump industry not being ready. They do not represent my company, nor the hundreds of European companies developing natural refrigerant heat pumps and, importantly, components that are using those heat pumps across Europe today. Just a bit of a history lesson here for those of us that weren't involved 10 years ago. When we were last discussing the EU F-gas regulation 10 years ago, what became the second F-gas regulation, the hot topic at the time was commercial refrigeration and whether natural refrigerants could meet demand, could meet quality concerns and performance. Back then, those same associations, EPI and EHPA, were again negative, claiming that the systems would be too costly, less efficient, and destroy jobs. They were clearly wrong. Natural refrigerants are the standard solution today in Europe for commercial refrigeration. European companies lead the world today in refrigeration, and they're expanding globally. And it'll be the same story again with heat pumps. Remember one thing, heat pumps are not rocket science. It's not like sending a man or a woman to Mars. The companies that develop those components heat pumps, use many standard components today. Okay, and those very same companies that developed these components for natural refrigeration systems 10 years ago are ready today for natural refrigerant heat pumps. We don't need another 10 years, and yes, we can be ambitious. So over to you, Carolina, for a few opening statements from your organization.
Thank you very much, Mark. So my name is Carolina Coronen, and I am a program manager at ECOS Environmental Coalition on Standards. Together with Davide Sabadin, who's also here in the panel, and who's Senior Policy Officer at the European Environmental Bureau, we fight both for the decarbonisation of heating and for a swift phase down of fluorinated greenhouse gases. And we're both Brussels-based NGOs working in both of these files. In our view, the decarbonisation of the heating sector is, of course, a very important and urgent goal. But we want to stress that we cannot solve one problem by creating another, and in this case, the other problem being F-gases. And in the context of our work in the last couple of years, we've heard from refrigeration industry stakeholders. We've heard them push back at the prospect of a more ambitious F-gas regulation, raising some of the concerns already quoted by Mark. And we wanted to learn more about to what extent these were actual risks. And with the support of the European Climate Foundation, we therefore conceptualized this study, and that Atmosphere has carried out for us. And as we will see soon, the findings indicate that rather than hindering the decarbonization of heating, a strict phase down, which is in line with the climate neutrality objectives of the EU, can accelerate a shift from fossil fuel-based heating systems straight to a future-proof and clean heat pump technology. And this will be the message that we will bring with us in our continued work on the revision of the F-gas regulation. So to everyone who's attending today, I hope you will find this report launch as interesting as we do. And with these words, I'd like to give the floor to Atmosphere to present the study.
Thank you, Carolina, for putting context to this report and what your organizations, ECOS and EEB, will be doing in this in the next 12 months on these key dossiers. So next up, we have my colleague, Thomas, who was one of the lead authors of this report, and he's put together a compelling presentation, and he's going to talk us through that now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, Carolina, for these introductory remarks. You set the message very straight. It's actually what we have found in this report, right? There's no need to lock into the heat pump deployment in Europe substances such as F-gases, okay? So this is the straight message that we want to convey. I'm gonna share some slides. Actually, we got a lot of ground to cover, so I'll try to be as brief and quick as possible, because really we found a lot of content that we would like to share. But we believe that, I mean, it's also end of June, so everyone has its busy schedule, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. Okay, so this is the report, how it stands at the moment, title and everything. So insights from the research will be presented today to you. I'm Thomas Trevisan, policy analyst at Atmosphere, as Mark has already said. Quick introduction about Atmosphere we've already gone through, and here is the agenda of today. First, I would like to start with presenting the team that has worked on this project from Atmosphere side. Then we'll go through the methodology adopted and scope. We will talk a bit and spend some words about the decarbonization of the heating systems in Europe. And then something that has popped up across multiple conversations is that heat pumps for some stakeholders are all equal, but actually there's much more to be analyzed for every single heat pump. So I will give some ideas on how to understand what is the climate alignment of heat pumps. And that would actually lead us to the discussion about refrigerants, okay? I would like to also quote after that in slide 5, a quick extract from the European Commission memorandum accompanying the F-gas regulation, where it actually quite clearly states that what has been taken into the proposal, so the measure that has been taken, are aligned with the need to scale up heat pumps. And finally, we will share some insights. Of course, these will be only a few of them, because we want you to actually download the report, going through it, and provide feedback to us in the coming month. So here, very briefly, thank you very much to my colleagues that have provided inputs, to Ilana Korkenberger, to Sabrina Munao, that have followed all the reports with their expertise. Thank you to the project partners, already said, ECOS, EEB, and ECF. And a big thank you to all the members of Atmo Connect. This is a network of experts that operate in natural refrigerants. We share with them a lot, try to inform this report as much as possible from a real industry perspective. And of course, thanks to the companies that have agreed to share with us their insights. Our remark, there in the public version of the report, you won't find any name, no sensitive information and confidential one, because of course they are sensitive and confidential. So a bit about the methodology adopted and the research. So we focus on EU27, okay? We have gone and we've taken a very big desk-based research going through reports, academic papers, market research, and our own articles sourced from Hydrocarbons 21, Ammonia 21, and r744.com. Based on this knowledge that we have gathered, we have stress tested this hypothesis with stakeholders, with companies representative, and the report is the result of this process. The objective, as Carolina and Mark have already stated, is that we want to prove that the steeper the phase down of HFCs, the more natural refrigerant heat pumps can take a role in delivering clean cooling solutions in Europe, okay? And the report focused specifically on domestic sector. So we focus on capacity that are less than 12, heat pumps that have capacity of less than 12, because they are deemed by the Commission as relevant for the domestic sector. Now, I pasted this image because for industry stakeholders that follow the heating decarbonisation work stream, sometimes we do not, heating does not receive a lot of attention as much as, for instance, the decarbonisation of electricity, transportation, other hard-to-abate sectors. However, sometimes there's we believe that there's too much of a strict relation between heat pumps and heating. So there are other ways in which heating can be decarbonized, for instance, improving energy efficiency of buildings, insulation, behavioral changes. So heat pumps are definitely an important measure, because you shift and switch from gas and oil boilers to electricity-based appliances, but it's not the whole story. This all decarbonization of heating happens in the context and in the background of different policy measures that target mainly climate and energy. You have the EU Green Deal, you have the EU climate law regulation, you have the UF gas regulation, of course. That is definitely the direction of travel for heat pumps. Okay, I'm not going to go through into these regulations because I assume everyone already knows them. Now, I want participants to just have a look at this picture and the text that is inside. We know that buildings are very important. Okay, heating is important. Buildings are responsible for 40% of European energy consumption, and are therefore the single largest energy consumers in bloc. Okay. Energy for heating, cooling, and domestic hot water accounts for 80% of citizen energy consumption, and 36% of energy-related indirect greenhouse gases emission comes from buildings. These are data from the European Commission. And surrounding these texts, there are 10 different products from 10 different companies that provide heat pumps with natural refrigerants. So we're not here talking about a couple of companies. We're talking about a big chunk, okay? So we're talking about these are what is market available. So these are screenshots from internet. So I'm not confidential product or whatever. Now, another interesting point that we found while conducting this report is about the way people define heat pumps. There's still a lot of confusion apparently, and that's why I felt the need to provide this taxonomy for heat pumps. This is actually an elaboration from a colleague that is working at the RMI Institute and was directly sourced from a webinar that EEB conducted on how to decarbonize old and historic buildings, with focus on the Empire State Building in this circumstance. I think it has some value because actually there's a lot of confusion and it's sometimes difficult to compare apple with apples and be misled by the word heat pumps. However, of course, here we all, I assume we all know what a heat pump is, how it works. There is the energy source, there is the cycle of the refrigerant, the vapor compression cycle, and then there is the energy sink. This is where cooling or heating, in this case, is delivered and when is used. Heat pumps are very interesting because they take advantage of the surrounding energy in form of heat, so either water, air, or ground source, and with a top-up of electricity, they deliver what is needed. However, as Mark was saying, there are different proxies according to which we can understand if all heat pumps are equal, okay? I will just briefly mention the first two and then deep dive a bit into the energy efficiency, which is always a theme and a topic that is about natural refrigerant, whatever application are less efficient. This is a myth that is going to be debunked as well. And then we're going to deep dive into the refrigerant topic. Unfortunately, as I was saying, heat pumps still rely a lot on electricity. They will rely on electricity. And the electricity generation mix in Europe, it's very varied and still rely a lot on combustible fuels, 41.3%. And each member state has a different generation, electricity generation mix. So not all heat pumps are equal in terms of where you deploy them. You will have a more climate aligned heat pumps or less climate aligned heat pumps. This is the first proxy. Second one is about the raw material that you use. Okay, the European Commission is strictly assessing and analyzing the heat pump value chain. And this is a report that came out in 2021. The Commission is actually working right now on a 2022 report. And this is going to be a yearly exercise the Commission is taking. What I would like simply to point out today is that 4 out of 5 raw materials that are useful and are used in the heat pump supply chain are deemed as vulnerable by the Commission. Especially aluminium, I would like to focus your attention on because there is 64% of import dependence. And aluminium is one of the goods that has been included in the carbon border adjustment mechanism, implying that aluminium that is important from beyond Europe is actually much more carbon intensive. So in the 2021 report by the Commission, the one we've just shown, there was no mention about refrigerants, or very few. But we are actually happy to see that in the 2022, the work has been, there's been a lot of work put in trying to understand this. And we're happy that some of our considerations have been taken on board so far. For instance, fluorspar, which is one of the precursors of many HFCs, is basically a very, the market, the global market is dominated by China. And here you see 55% global, the global production. The same holds true for HFCs. It's well known that globally, China is one of the biggest producers of HFCs and is the main importer of bulk HFCs into Europe, okay, as the graph from the European Environment Agency show. And this is also interesting to know that all the inputs that from China are actually 60% of the HFC supply. That was a data from 2020. We wanted to show this slide because we believe now there are possibilities of bottlenecks because China is also taking action on HFCs domestically by ratifying the Kigali Amendment. Okay, so we foresee some problems in the terms of the global market of HFCs. Another point here is about efficiency. Okay, these two graphs come from the International Energy Agency heat pump technology collaboration program, Annex 54, low GWP systems. These are 2 graphs from the German contribution to the 2021 report. And the main message here is that market available heat pumps that are installed today, air to water, have the same efficiency, if not better, than other fluorinated F-gases, whether they are high GWP or low GWP. Specifically here, you can see in the first graph on the left, different refrigerants. This is the BAFA tables of the BAFA data set. So different heat pumps that are present and are subject and they can receive incentives from the German government. And they have been related with their efficiency and their refrigerant. As you can see, R290 is scoring very well. The same holds true for another database, the HP Keymark database, which is a graph on the right. As you can see, the efficiency is proven to be very well. Another proxy through which you can assess the climate alignment of heat pumps is actually the life cycle climate performance. This is a graph that is sourced from the same study of the 2 graphs before. Is a contribution from the United States, actually the University of Maryland. And they basically gone through they modeled 10.5 kilowatt capacity units in different cities with different refrigerants. They understood what are the emissions in terms of direct, indirect, and carbon embedded in the material. And as you can see here, R290 always score the lowest. Now, finally, we deep dive into the world of refrigerants and fluorinated gases. If you're here, if you're attending, I assume you already know what has been the chemical threadmill in the past years. Halogenated refrigerant have forced the global community to fix yet known problems since 1987, first with ozone depletion, then with global warming potential. And now we have this new regulatory framework that is in the making from 5 European countries, which is targeting the chemical toxicity and persistency of some HFCs and HFOs. Okay, so then if you are familiar with the MARC presentation that was given in Denmark, I think this is a very clear representation and visualization of what has been the chemical threadmill related to refrigerants so far. CFCs, HCFCs, HFCs, and now HFOs with water acidification. Okay, so now there's a lot also of discussion about, can the UF gas be a problem in terms of the fast and quick deployment of heat pumps due to REPowerEU and due to Russia invasion into Ukraine? To this extent, I would like to quote a brief paragraph from the Commission that is inside the UF gas regulations exploratory memorandum. So allow me to quote that a bit. Hold on a second, I'll find it. So the UF gas regulation and the Commission has already undertaken a stress testing exercise, okay? And saying special attention has also been paid to the fact that the decarbonization of the energy system will require high growth rates for heat pumps that currently are marketed with F gases in the Union. This is in particular due to the recent geopolitical developments requiring a higher growth in heat pumps to reduce dependence on oil and gas, as outlined in the communication REPowerEU. In order to reach climate neutrality, it is important to have policy in place that increase the energy efficiency as much as possible and that limit direct emissions from F gases. This is particularly important since any heat pump equipment with F gases that is put into operation today will lead to direct greenhouse gas emission for many years into the future due to leakage, necessary servicing with more F gases, and possible emission when the equipment enter the waste stream. Where possible, this should be avoided, which is why specific product bans are included. Finally, overall, it is estimated that a proposed review of the quota system following the preferred option of the impact assessment has sufficient buffer to allow for such growth in heat pump deployment. Key message, the Commission has already undertook a stress test on this, is in the impact assessment, so it's not a last sentence put because of urgency. There's actually been some work done on it. And industry stakeholders that say this, the exact opposite, have not so far, to my knowledge, provided data on this in terms of what is the allowance that they should need to deliver, okay? It's just simple critic at this point in time. Again, 2 measures here. The first one is the HFC phase down, so kind of a visualization, and then the bans. Of course, going through a different discussion with stakeholders, we've understood that the UF gas regulation is actually very critical to set and determine the direction of travel of this heat pump deployment. As Mark was saying here, a very quick and brief slide on industry stakeholders reactive, okay, in case the technology is there, what can they deliver? This is the comparison with commercial refrigeration. We see that when the previous, so the current F-gas regulation was discussed, there's actually a 67% and 59% uptake in terms of the deployment of CO2 transcritical systems. Okay, so that means that industry stakeholders are very responsive to the policy inputs that comes from Brussels. as Carolina was saying, it's important to not lock into this deployment of heat pumps substances that are a problem, okay? And actually, at the moment, we found out it is a problem. 80% of heat pump systems sold in 2019 in Europe use HFCs 410A, which has a GWP of 2088 and a GWP 20 years of 4,400. Same holds true for HFCs 134A, which actually is also considered a PFAS, according to the scope of taken by the 5 European countries and the OECD. HFC 32 and R290 are considered to be the third and fourth choice respectively, and they complete the market share. Why is it important to understand this? Because the Commission and the consultant that have delivered the revision of the UF gas regulation have already done an exercise in terms of, according to a certain phase down, what could be the estimated surcharge on every single HFC that is marketed. And this is the second figure on this slide. You can see there is a 335% increase from 2025 to 20. Sorry, I have the. By 2050, sorry, I have exactly the column of faces on my right side, which is covering the last bars. Still, it's a pretty tough and intense increase, okay? So this is to warn about not taking future-proof solutions. Then another question mark. The science studying F gases is developing. We've seen the rise in the GWP values of R32, which is actually marketed as one of the preferred options. But actually, there's an upward trend, according to the IPCC assessment reports for 5 and 6. And then the same stakeholders in 2019 are already admitting that they are looking beyond R32. Well, why is important? Because of course, if you lower the GWP, that means that the space down is actually not affecting you as much. Is it the same? Because it's in terms of CO2 equivalent. So the lower the GWP, potentially the more refrigerant you can sell. This is very important to understand. Finally, we start to share some insights from our research. As Mark was saying here, there is a map of OEMs, component manufacturers that have already in their portfolio pieces, also other equipments or components that can work with natural refrigerant, specifically with flammabilities. Okay, you can see that is a very widespread map, so it covers all EU27 and is not about a single country that we are in this case advocating for, but it's very widespread across Europe. Technology is there and is ready to be scaled up with dedicated policy action. This is one of the main messages that we've gathered from stakeholders. In terms of costs, from our interviews, we've gathered that an average price for natural refrigerant heat pump is generally below 20% in difference with F gases. So we have understood that this is a feasible commitment. In terms also of setting up productions dedicated to handling flammability concerns, we have been told that is less than 10%, the difference. And another issue that we would like to raise is the stability of the market of F gases and versus natural alternatives. These two graphs come from the research and the analysis that Oco Research is conducting on behalf of the Commission. You can see the very stark difference between fluorinated gases and natural alternatives in air. Other insights we've gathered is a commitment from the companies we have talked to invest more in the expansion of natural refrigerant heat pump productions. If you are familiar with this environment, you know what are the companies I'm talking about. Unfortunately, for confidentiality concern, I could not share these on this report. The same holds true for the reconversion of production line from our oil and gas boilers directly to natural refrigerant heat pumps. Of course, as well, there are few interesting examples on this. And then also commitments, public one, to scale up the weight of natural refrigerant sold unit into the yearly sold portfolio, up to 90% in a few years. Last slide, the one before the last, so about drivers and barriers that we are actually highlighting to policymakers, because we want to ensure that the decarbonization of heating is actually future-proof. Of course, I'm focusing on barriers here. We need to scale up the production of components for natural refrigerant systems. We need to train personnel. We need to cater for the flammability of the working fluid, in this case, for instance, propane or hydrocarbons. We need, of course, to solve the problem of lack of targeted policy action, which was in the current regulation, but now we have some targeted action. More restrictive safety standards. There is the new edition of the -2-40 for air conditioner and heat pumps that allows for an increased charge of flammable refrigerants in indoor cycles, and then allows for greater capacity to be delivered. And of course, common problem is the price difference that we currently have between fossil fuels that are subsidized and electricity. In terms of drivers, we have understood that policy action in the F-gas regulation is going to be one of the key ones, because the technology is there. So industry needs to just deliver and to be convinced to scale up. Other drivers, of course, economic incentives, not only on new equipment, but also on retrofit is important. Of course, all regulations are targeting heating. These are relevant for stakeholders that operate with heat pumps. Key conclusions. Natural refrigerant heat pump stakeholders are ready to support the ambition targets set by the Fit for 55 and REPowerEU deployment of millions of heat pumps. Okay. The technology is ready, and the market needs to be supported through policy signals. Economies of scale will eventually reduce the small premium currently associated with these future-proof and climate-aligned technologies. These are insights that we have gathered from industry stakeholders. This is the end of my presentations. Just a couple of few things. We have set up a dedicated website where you can read some of the main extract of this report. You can also download it. And these are our email, Mark, myself, and Sabrina's. We welcome feedback, and we look forward to work with you all in the coming month.
Thank you, Thomas. Can I just maybe share my screen as well, if you don't mind?
Sure.
So for those of you that want to view the report now, you just go to our website, atmosphere.cool, and then you scroll down to reports, and then you'll see the latest one on heat pumps here, where you can download the report itself, as Thomas mentioned, view some of the key information. We'll also post the webinar in a minute there, and then you can view it in the PDF reader. There is another way, a shorter way. You can just go straight to reports here on the solutions part and click there. So that's a shortcut. We'll be sharing the report widely. One question that I saw on LinkedIn, because we're streaming this on different platforms right now, and we got a question, Thomas, about whether it's possible to share a list of heat pump manufacturers. Is that something that we're allowed to do and share?
Actually, there is a list of heat pump manufacturers that we actually sourced from, and there's the EHPA, which is a public one.
Yeah.
We would need to understand what data are actually shareable with the public, with the companies that have agreed to talk with us.
No, but I mean, if we can already provide a list of companies, because there's a variety of different reports that we used and stakeholders we talked with. I don't know if that's something that we can make public, but to answer that question to Dragos, who asked the question on LinkedIn, maybe we could come up with a list that of companies working on natural refrigerant heat pumps. But we'd have to double check with those companies to make sure that they're willing to make that public knowledge. but that shouldn't be an issue. So that's something that we'll look into, right, Thomas?
Sure.
All right, so a couple of comments that we got from people on just a comment from Rene van Gerven, who's basically saying, hey, welcome, very important to ensure the speeding up of heat pump implementation without using HFOs and R32. Yes, we couldn't agree more. And then a comment from Menno van der Hof, a well-known expert in heat pumps, who's bringing natural refrigerant solutions to market as we speak. He said that another reason why heat pumps will become more important in the future is that as buildings as we have more modern buildings, they'll be more insulated. So they'll actually overheat in the summer, and heat pumps can also be used for cooling, unlike other systems. So this will be another benefit, another reason for using heat pumps. So are there comments from Carolina or Davide to what was said so far? Any additional information that you wish to share at this juncture? And whilst you think about that, I put you on the spot, sorry guys, whilst you think about how to answer that, then maybe if there are other people participating on the webinar right now, they can, there's a button on the window at the bottom says Q&A, so you can submit your questions or comments there, and then we'll try and answer those questions accordingly. Over to Davide or Carolina.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Indeed, I'd like to have to make a remark. I mean, you made it in the beginning, and I think maybe it wasn't further stressed during the presentation of Thomas. By the way, thanks, Thomas, for your very, very extensive presentation. I think that the parallel, the comparison, let's say, with what happened with the refrigeration market is an important one here, because when it is questioning the capacity of the industry to uptake, I mean, the production in due time, and the link between demands and this capacity in growth, I think we have a clear case there. And I don't know if Thomas has any chart on that or more further information on that. But I mean, I'd like to also mention this, because maybe if also to the viewers of the webinars, because I know that there's information about this in the report, and I think it's a good case to make, and it's a relevant part of the. So I mean, I think that the report is solid also because it builds on this specific parallel comparison.
Yeah, no, thank you, Davide. I'm trying to find that reference, that chart from the report that kind of show. Yeah, I found it. Thomas, do you want me to share the screen?
Sure, please.
Yeah, I mean, this you'll be able to find in the report itself. But basically, if we just look at commercial refrigeration, this is when F-gas 1 was already in place since 2005-06 time frame. Then there was a discussion of updating it again in around 2013, 14, 15. And you see a huge jump, obviously, but so in 2018, immediately after the current regulation that is about to be updated, the F-gas regulation was in place, that you could already see that there was momentum globally, but Europe was leading with Japan second. But then it really has taken off. And now into 2021, it's more than doubled. And this number is conservative. We're over 50K right now, 50,000 systems in place today in Europe already. So it's really taken off, and that has been driven by the regulation. And you can see that, I think what you were referring to here, Davide, is this, right? This chart, the number of installations. You can see it's really skyrocketed. And this is thanks to basically regulations with bans, and this is an anticipation of bans that were coming a few years later. It'll be the same case with heat pumps.
Yeah.
And there are many manufacturers that have that, I remember the amount of discussions we were told, oh, they would never happen, and they were clearly wrong. And it's the same thing here with heat pumps, natural refrigerant heat pumps, because there are certain incumbents that want to sell R32 heat pumps, or simple, and we can go straight to natural refrigerants. And there are many players in that market. And we've just talked about domestic heat pumps, but commercial, industrial, even many more players in that space too. So it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
And if you have ambition, and if policymakers stay ambitious, then they're going to kickstart a massive industry in Europe, which will lead the world. And there are a lot of people around the world that want heat pumps. Okay, so.
I think there's a question.
Yeah, there's a question from Jose Rodrigo. I'll read it out. Okay, I need to put my glasses on. Sorry. For residential application, we could say air to water systems would be great, but currently there are many restrictions for L3 refrigerants. So how do you think the regulations such as EN 378 and the EN 335-2-40 in order to be able to use R290 refrigerants for split air to air units up to 12 kilowatt? Whoa, that's a tough question. There is an interesting point in the Article 16.4 in the F-gas proposal that should be clarified about the safety is first. So in some cases, natural refrigerants might not be used. Do you know in which cases they're referring to? Thomas?
I see David as his hand.
Okay, David, you want to raise your hand? You want to answer that one?
I can partially answer to that. I mean, while the air-to-air heat pumps were not part of the scope and the study, and it's as you clearly stated in the beginning, Mark, which is because I mean they are a more difficult market for natural refrigerant, but not an impossible one by all means. No. I like to just say that again from internal and analysis and talks with the companies that are working on natural refrigerant and air conditioning and heat pumps. We understand that already now there are talks and programs being rolled out for trainings in Europe for the installing of air-to-air nature-based, natural refrigerant-based heat pumps, which have been on the market for a couple of years, but have been and could potentially be installed, but have not been installed based on the fact that the responsibility was on the installer. So there's a problem of framework, like legal framework to be defined there and clarified. I would like also to come back to the point that from our perspective in terms of safety, which is not at stake. I think we're all on the same page when I say that we value safety first as a principle that has not to be forgotten, of course. But I like to mention that we all are, most of us are heated with systems now working on methane, so both explosive and burnable and flammable gas that run through pipes and work on an open flame system, which is the boilers. Okay? But then we're very worried about having a small quantity of propane between two spirits that will just work on a sealed circuit. I wonder why we should be worried about that and not worry about what's happening already today. So we kind of feel that this is a bit overstated.
Well put, Davide. A comment and question from Pierre Boyer. He's saying, thank you for an interesting presentation. Does Atmosphere plan to conduct a similar exercise for medium-sized systems or for multi-apartment buildings and larger systems? I guess I can answer that. Yeah, it's definitely in the pipeline. It's definitely something we're looking at. Yes, so feel free to reach out to us to get involved, because this is going to be a hot topic going forward. An anonymous attendee said, will natural refrigerants get any uplift regarding eco design against R32 and R410A? By uplift, you're meaning kind of like an easier way to be as efficient, I'm guessing, is what he's referring to. Any comments there from Carolina or Davide or Thomas?
Well, I can jump in here, as ECOS also works on eco design quite a bit.
Yeah.
This is something that we have been suggesting in the revision of product specific eco design and energy labeling regulations, that we would like to see a bonus malus system that will bump less pollutant refrigerants higher, or even ban them where it's possible. Unfortunately, this has not been this has not really been taken into consideration in the revision of those regulations, but we think it's a good idea.
Okay, thank you, Carolina. Davide, you want to add, or you're cool with that?
No, just to add that we are in a dialogue, of course, with the European Commission, the DG Energy for these specific regulations, and we hold that it would be important to have the distinctions there and some sort of favor for natural refrigerants, not necessarily for their performance that sometimes are just the same as the others, but because that's where member states base their incentive schemes on, and green public procurement. So we have to give a signal to the market and make sure that that incentives are geared towards the cleanest and the greenest option. Therefore, that's why we would like to have this sort of a positive bias towards natural refrigerant in those regulations. But as I said, there's no sign that this is going to happen. For now, it's just an open discussion with the Commission.
Okay. All right. So there's a lot of questions. We're going to run out of time, but all right. Another one. There's many different questions coming from many different platforms, so I'm trying to coordinate all of those. Question: do you have a list of HFC, HFOs, or HFO precursors that are being investigated by REACH in Helsinki for potential PFAS impact? Okay. Do you want to add there, Thomas?
Sure.
I mean, is it something that we've published on our various marketplaces?
Yeah, I mean, there's the scope that actually automatically define what refrigerants are included. So once you add the scope to the list, you understand which ones are included. In my presentation, I've listed a few. So there is HFCs 125, which is part of 410A. Then there is HFC 134A. Then there is HFO 1234YF and ZE. These are considered PFAS with current scope.
Yeah, so we can maybe send more details to the person who asked that question later. Okay. Then a question, a comment from someone who's not happy with the fact that we referred to GWP of 20 instead of 100, saying that that's not a good indicator of a long run effect. Yeah, but we'll all be dead by then if we wait 100 years. So what's the point? What we need is a real impact, okay? And that's what really matters in the short term. I don't know if the person has kids, but I do, and I want to make a difference now, and I know that everyone else in this space does too. So misleading people with a 100-year GW to make it sound like it's less relevant or less dangerous is misleading. So that's why we add 20 to the 100-year, which is a legal obligation, because we want people to see what's really happening in the ground or in the atmosphere. Anyone else wish to comment on that?
No, just adding that the Commission has followed the same approach. I mean, reporting to the Montreal Protocol will still be 100 years because that's negotiation on the international level. But science is also assessing at 20 years.
Yes, and they're starting to do that, right? With the latest IPCC report, they also add the 20-year column next to the 100-year, and then you let people choose their choice. And having both is the right way ahead, I believe. Then you can pick and choose depending on what you believe in. So that's a question to the gentleman that raised that issue. Okay. Couple more. Okay, so the question, R290 is surely fine with air to water, considering monoblock will cannibalize splits, and air to air with some additional difficulties. But what future do you see with more efficient architecture like ground source heat pumps and water to water in general? Anyone wish to add comment on that one?
I personally think is a very interesting topic to research. So we are pretty much in favor of natural refrigerants for across the whole spectrum. I don't have relevant information to share at this point in time, but I think it's something to look out for.
Okay, that's something that I guess we'll be reaching out to some of the companies that the companies we talked with for this report. We can definitely feed that question to them and see how they respond to that. But my guess would be that they don't see that as a real issue going forward either. Then, yeah, so Menno Vanderhoff responds saying, ground source heat pumps may operate with just 20 to 30 grams per kilowatt. So within the 980 gram limit for a basement, any residential size unit will be possible to be developed. So I guess Menno, this is actually a conversation. So between Menno and Mathieu Stoll. So then that's Menno's answer that I just read out to you. And then Mathieu says, but then the trade-off is efficiency. Then it becomes counterproductive to go natural refrigerants in this specific case. I don't know if Menno, you're still online, but okay, David, if Menno, if you're still online, yes, maybe Menno, you wish to answer that. We can, is there a way of giving him the speaker slot? Let me see if I can give him.
Hello?
Yeah, Menno, go ahead. You want to answer that one?
Well,
go ahead.
It's a matter of the ongoing development of plate heat exchangers, and we haven't reached the finish yet. So also with the supplier of material, we can find plate heat exchangers which become more efficient by the year. So we are not yet at the end of the capabilities. So
we're at the beginning, basically, right?
Yeah, let the R&D do its work.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Menno. Davide, you raised your hand.
Yes, I mean, on the efficiency argument, I think that the slide that Thomas presented before was kind of based on the German market, was very explicit on that, showing that there's no efficiency gap overall. I mean, there might be some specific cases for some specific applications as of now, but as you mentioned, it was just the beginning. So efficiency is not really a trade-off across the board. It's not really being looked at as a problem. But I like to come back again to the example of refrigeration, because the arguments when the refrigeration against refrigeration going natural were like efficiency in warm climates. There were charges, limits, and the safety. Okay, all of these arguments have been wiped out by technological innovation, and we expect that the heat pumps market will just do the same. So it's not really a technical problem, as the way we see it, and also the way we understand the replies from the manufacturers. It's just a matter of time and money. So the right amount of money and in the right timing has to be put into place. But things are technically good.
And very well put, Davide, thank you. But I think also to add to that is that, you know, companies want certainty. They want to have a game plan. They want to know what's happening in the future. And they want to know if the regulations are ambitious, then the good news here is that we have an ecosystem in Europe of component suppliers and system suppliers for heat pumps that are ready to deliver on the natural refrigerant side. So, and they're ambitious. They're definitely ambitious. They want to grab market share. It's that simple. Let them do that. Let them get more market share. That's a good thing for the environment, and it will create jobs that have a future. So, market certainty regulations that are ambitious really help in this case. And that's just exactly what happened with commercial refrigeration. Exactly what happened with commercial refrigeration. Okay, we got time for one comment, one more question from Imke. Right, so how do you judge the necessary upskilling of workforce plus the reluctance to advocate for heat pumps, which do not need as much maintenance by installation companies, so the company advocating for heat pumps is cutting their future orders? Okay, how do you judge the necessary? Okay, so, you know, upscaling the workforce is going to be a key issue, right? That's clear. But I think the comment here is, maybe there's a point of clarifying here, the reluctance. So the comment here is that the manufacturers of heat pumps are reluctant to promote that because then they're jeopardizing future orders. because they want these systems to fail. Is that how I interpret that question? I don't know if I've interpreted it correctly. Imke, please feel free to comment. But upscaling, is that something that we looked at for the report? Davide, Carolina, Thomas, did we look at the issue of training? Because that is obviously going to be an issue.
I mean, yes, one of the drivers, and of course one of the barriers is the fact of supporting scaling of natural refrigerant heat pumps, right, and heat pumps in general. So according to how you see that, but definitely was a point that was mentioned multiple times by stakeholders.
Yeah. I mean, the way I interpret the current F-gas proposal as it's written before it goes to the Parliament, correct me if I'm wrong, Davide or Carolina, but I interpret it as, this is now going to be compulsory to certify for natural refrigerants, which is hugely important. And that will game change the market in Europe, because it will make people having to learn about cooling and heating. They will have to look at natural refrigerants also. And that is something that's not been in the books up until now. It's been more voluntary. So that's a great thing. All right, Davide, you raise your hand.
Yeah, this is a very critical point indeed. I mean, you're right. This is going to be compulsory, and there's going to be the need of the member states to have to take action on this. There are no clear roadmaps imposed on national member states. No KPIs, so there's no really the sense of urgency there. In terms of member states to act on this, and it is seen together with the upfront cost. It is seen as one of the major obstacles for the uptake of heat pumps altogether. So when it comes to training, I'd like to also stress an important point. We are in the market where most of the professionals are not trained to properly install heat pumps, regardless of the refrigerants we're talking about. So because we are at the eve of a big training action across Europe, and we now know that this training will take place on all refrigerants. It's important to know that in the next year, we're going to train a lot of professionals, and these professionals will also work on natural refrigerants. This means that the small share of people working on natural refrigerants will be expanded massively as we expand massively the amount of technicians that are able to install, which are needed actually to install the projected amount of heat pumps that we need for the Repower EU. So it is really not a problem for natural refrigerant; it's a problem of heat pump as a product as a whole, and it has to be tackled as soon as possible. Sure.
Thank you, Davide. Imke was able to reply or clarify the comment from earlier and sent that basically added that the craftsmen that used to install gas boilers are bad-mouthing heat pumps. So yeah, that is an issue clearly, because that's a competition that's going to take away jobs from them, right? So, but then I guess this is also an opportunity for them to get involved on the heat pump side, because it might create new opportunities for them. But yeah, that's always going to be a challenge. There's always going to be barriers. People don't like change. It's that simple. But climate change is forcing change upon us, whether we like it or not. So that's how I would answer that. Of course, it's all about retraining and giving these guys, the craftsmen, opportunities to retrain to use heat pumps properly and make good livings from them. And I think that's clearly an opportunity. All right, we've got 1 minute left. And we've run out of time. So thanks, everyone. I'd like to thank Thomas, obviously, for the presentation, but it was a team effort. So thank you, Carolina, and thank you, Davide, and thank you, ECF, for funding this research. So we're very happy to have worked with you guys to participate on this debate about heat pumps, which is going to be the hot topic going forward. So thank you, everyone, and we'll be in touch. And we'll share the report shortly on various channels. Bye-bye.